Have we been looking at serial killers in the wrong way? This is Inverted World Live. It is this show's 1 year anniversary. That's crazy.
Happy anniversary.
That's crazy. It's been 1 year, huh?
Yeah, it's been 1 year. I can't believe it.
That's a full normal year?
Look how far we've come.
A normal year of 365 days?
I don't know if I'd say normal.
That doesn't feel like a year, honestly.
Yeah, it was Mother's Day last year. We had Tim on the show and kicked off the party.
Wow.
Of Inverted World.
I remember when we came to look at the studio for the first time, and it was a solar eclipse.
Oh, yeah,
Remember
that's
that?
right.
And it
Yeah.
happened like while we were in this room, and everything just got like slightly darker. It seemed like a perfect way to start this
Of course.
entire thing. Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been an awesome year. So thank you to all the guests we've had. We've had some amazing guests. Some of my favorite people have agreed to come on the show. And I'm
thank you to the
blessed.
callers, too, for
The
calling
the callers are great. People who've sent in stories that I've just read. Everyone who's helped make this show so much fun. I'm really, really grateful for that. It's been a crazy year, and we've talked about so many crazy stories from the past and from the present. And a lot of the things we talk about, I think, gear us up to what's going to happen in the future.
in. And the spirits have come to love us, I think.
For now, I better knock on wood. I'm gonna knock. This is a coffin right in front of me, everyone. So it's for Micah.
Yeah.
It's for my, or it's a
Yeah,
particle
well,
board
good
coffin. Yeah. But we got Austin back. Last time he was here with Jose, we were planning to talk on one thing, and then I was like, wow, Waco just happened, like the anniversary for Waco. And then we kind of swerved, and they were good sports,
Yeah.
and they hung out, and they gave us the whole Waco breakdown, which was incredible, because I don't think a lot of people talk about Waco enough these days. These guys do, and they do a great job about it. But so we did that, and then all of a sudden it was like, I don't know, 2 hours later, an hour and a half later, I'm like, we didn't even get into the thing I booked them to talk about. So Austin came back, and we're gonna get into it right now. Let's bring him on. What up, brother?
What's up, brother? I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming back so soon. That was a great episode. The Waco thing, like I heard from a lot of people, because a lot of people don't know about it. It happened not that long ago, but in the way news moves these days, it's like 1,000 years ago. But it's a very important story. So, but what we were going to get into was this idea of serial killers, the Patsy stuff, and maybe there's another way to be looking at this phenomenon. So I'm gonna open up to you, dude. You are
Awesome,
the
man.
researcher here. The floor is yours.
I thought you were going to say you are the
Awesome,
serial
man.
killer here. So.
Yeah, this is an intervention. We know what you've been
Right.
doing.
Oh man. Well, I will say that just having the opportunity to come on to discuss Waco, I think, you know, I appreciate very much, just because Waco for me was, one of those that were my effectively, was my red pill, right?
Yeah.
It was my red pill moment, as far as um it was really Ruby Ridge, Waco, and OKC. And Ruby Ridge for me stood out more than anything, mainly because I kind of like I related to Sammy, right? To Randy's son,
Right.
right? Out on the farm. I grew up in Northwest Arkansas, out on the farm with my dog. My dad's a truck driver. My mom was a horse trainer, and just like it definitely, it was something that, listening to and reading about what had actually occurred, from their point of view, and how Stryker, their dog, was shot in the back after running playfully up to the federal agents and prancing around them. And I mean, it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
and then to shoot Sammy in the back, the little boy,
Yeah.
as he's fleeing. I mean, just because, I mean, imagine if you had federal agents, and unbeknownst to you, you aren't even aware they're federal agents who are encroaching on your property.
Yeah.
You've been trained as a child to protect your property, but let alone when they're firing upon your dog.
Yep.
They kill your dog, and you say, "Son of a bitch, you killed my dog."
Yep.
And then you fire back because you're a young boy, you don't know any better, and honestly, what do you do in that situation? And I would have shot, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
hard to say.
Yeah.
But
It's
anyway.
no, it's funny. You just unlocked a memory before we get into the main thing. Is like I also grew up on a farm. in the middle of nowhere. And my mom was also a horse trainer. That's very bizarre that we
Wow.
share that. I was like a barrel racer up until I was 16. So
Wow,
I did like
that's
gymkhanas and
amazing.
stuff. So, but being on a farm in the woods, you understand this idea of like what it means when there's like an intruder. Like I think more, obviously we all, houses can have intruders, but when you have this property that you defend, it's yours. And all of a sudden there's like these new things here that don't belong. You just
Hmm.
reminded me that I grew up near a military base. It was like a mile down the road. It was West Point. And every
Wow.
summer they would do their training. And like it wasn't our farm, it belonged to West Point. My parents were coaches for the equestrian team. And
Wow.
they used the woods as the war training grounds. So every summer, this might have been my red pill moment. Like as a little kid, helicopters are landing in my backyard, literally, and
Oh
soldiers
my God.
are jumping out with guns. But it's like they called it Miles gear. It was like a fancy laser tag,
Yeah.
and smoke bombs are going off all the time. Our horses have to get accustomed to the sound of loud booms because it's like fake
Holy
flash
shit.
grenades. So I was like, man, my whole life, this is probably why I'm paranoid, right? Because I'm like, the
Yeah.
military is constantly dropping into my backyard. And then one
Oh
morning,
my
I
God.
woke up to let the dogs out, and our entire house was surrounded by soldiers with on their stomachs with the guns pointed at our house.
Ooh.
Literally, swear, this is insane. And I was like, I was really young, and my mom was already awake. She's like, I'm just gonna go out and ask them what's going on.
Oh God.
We've been accustomed to the woods being infiltrated, but now our yard. And she was like, I'm gonna tell them that they're lying in our dog shit. And
And would
so
you
That's
like
so
some
funny.
coffee?
yeah. So she goes out, and the guy in charge is just like, they messed up their orienteering, and now they just have to go through with it. So
Oh,
my whole life, I'm like, at any minute, they're gonna jump out of
Yeah,
the
man.
sky and do it. And then I can go on forever about the things I used to do. I used to pull pranks on the military all the time.
That's
I might
amazing.
be the reason they like didn't do very well in overseas wars because I kept messing up their situation. But that's another story for another day.
Being being so close to that is fascinating, honestly, man. Like
mhm.
I can't even imagine what impact that would have on me because just growing up where I did, a very small rural community, the local police didn't have a whole lot to do.
Hmm.
So if you had some sort of like, and I had, and I thank God for this, the instinct that I sort of, and I think that my parents kind of helped cultivate that very instinct of just kind of individuality, but I had this strong rejection of authority from day one, and
Yeah.
and it was something that, wasn't necessarily, like, visible within the context of, my parents and how they kind of, approached, let's say, just structured authority in general, and
Hmm.
and so I bucked the system from day one, and I very much rejected the public school system as well, and
Yeah.
so, and then, of course, I idolized a lot of the wrong. Right, I kind of was drenched in the celebrity culture,
Hmm.
which I think is so it is a honestly, I think it's a negative phenomena that's effectively disrupting, American culture in general, right, is just the celebrity influence and how it's sort of, I believe, it's fulfilling this sort of, new age esoteric ideological system of control that is within the principle of the God hole
Mm.
that I think that, people can't quite isolate and, define for themselves at a real fundamental level to where they can kind of at least I think this is where we find ourselves in this path of the ideological subversion where we're consistently, misdirected.
Yeah.
And that is where I view the culture war stems from,
Hmm.
is just kind of this cultivated duality that's really deceptive in nature inherently and designed for that very reason, I think, to effectively pit us against each other within this unfortunate framework of the current structured system. And I think that that is where all of us consistently fall into place and are at least our the hypocritical aspects of our character are greatly unacknowledged, and I try so very hard just to, you know, at least reflect in honest terms within my own framework, psychologically to figure out where I can position myself to hopefully defend against, the false narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm saying, like, growing up where I did, it had an impact on me because I devoutly despised the police.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like, just from my experience of embracing drug culture in a negative way, it had a hugely negative impact on my life. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's like, it kind of also led me to this very interesting place, philosophically, where I'm ultimately grateful that I went down this path because
Mm-hmm.
it helped me realize the the current state of the justice system, right? And the excruciating details and aspects of that very much prove out to be effectively, you know, it's really a system that protects predators and punishes victims more often than you would think.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and that's something that, you know, it's just undeniable at this point, right? And to witness the level of federal cover-ups and how they've been facilitated throughout some of these various scandals and extraordinary historical events, like, let's say, I always remember the Finders cult because of Ramon J. Martinez, the U.S. Customs agent, who kind of blew the whistle until CIA stepped in and effectively removed all the evidence and either destroyed it or gave it back to the Finders cult. And
Wow.
that's a very strange story, by the way, obviously, because I think there are deep ties to the intelligence community, and I think that this was effectively a child sex trafficking operation where they were
Mm.
legitimately auctioning off children as well. If you listen to what Ted Gunderson has to say about all of this, like, Ted Gunderson has a very interesting statement in regard to the finders. He actually says that it was a CIA front, and Ted Gunderson ran the LA, the LA FBI field office, right, for quite some time,
Why do I know that name?
and
Is that just from the FBI? That name sounds so familiar. I feel like I've seen that in other
yeah, no,
stories.
he's come up often in
Yeah.
the terms of a lot of these investigations, including the Fort Bragg murders and Dr. Jeffrey McDonald.
Okay.
Definitely he was involved in interviewing, he became a private investigator after his days in the FBI.
Okay.
And then he claims that he was getting all of this information and evidence from contacts within the bureau that were still effectively, like, providing him with evidence and documents that would prove out that there was this very well established, seemingly, it looked as if, again, you have these plausible deniability private front organizations that are essentially being utilized by intelligence in order to provide that plausible deniability as a CIA cutout, in order to, of course, it's more than just it's also, so of course you have human trafficking, but you have to also consider the enterprise as a whole, right? This is something that I think people are unaware of for the most part, where, like, this provides a window into that intersections where you have targeted assassinations, you have, child pornography, snuff film, or organ harvesting,
Right.
uh, you know, prostitution,
It's
and
like the
and
dark
drug
web in the
smuggling,
real
weapons
world.
smuggling.
The dark web
Yeah,
in the like
exactly.
pre-dark web, real world, crazy stuff.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you said you were going to say
And
Gunderson was going to say that the CIA that was a CIA front for sure.
absolutely, yeah. So, and by the way, that there's direct evidence of this. I think Athena Veronis is a very great kind of key prominent individual who provides a direct connection to the intelligence apparatus. But again, he says Ted Gunderson describes the finders as a CIA front established in the 1960s. Members specially trained government kidnappers with top clearance and protection in their assigned task of stealing children, torturing and sexually abusing them, sometimes involving them in satanic orgies, bloody rituals, and murder of other children with the slaughter of animals, which he's 100% right. This is all proven by, New York. There's a NYPD detective, James Rothstein. He's a very interesting resource. He had ties to military intelligence. Actually, he was the one who he was the one who arrested Frank Sturgis at Marita Lorenz's apartment when he was on his way to assassinate her.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
Frank Sturgis tells him, so he gains Frank Sturgis's trust while he sits down with him. Well, first of all, he's hiding in Marita Lorenz's apartment waiting for Sturgis because he gets a tip that Marita Lorenz is going to be assassinated today. And so, and again, Marita Lorenz, right? Her father was a Nazi SS U-boat captain.
Right.
Paperclip vibes all day long
Oh
is the
yeah.
first thing I'm thinking.
Of
And then
course.
what happens instantly? She comes over to the States and effectively becomes a child spook,
Mm.
honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably, she's wrapped up in the CIA's operation to assassinate Fidel Castro, and they send Marita Lorenz to Cuba, and she falls in love with Fidel, and she
Wow.
inevitably becomes pregnant and then wakes up no longer with child,
Really?
really. And then she's brought back, put into a CIA safe house, and she claims that she witnessed Howard Hunt, Frank Sturgis, and all the usual suspects convening in these CIA safe houses and black sites, where they were planning the Dallas operation. And she actually said that she rode with them across state lines to Dallas to take weapons for the operation as well. Before the CIA pilots like Tosh Plumley and Barry Seal allegedly were the pilots who piloted in the kill squads to Dallas that day. And so you had multiple
Holy
kill teams
crap.
that were stationed. One was at the airport, and one was at right. And so you again you have the triangulated fire, which is perfectly staged, which had already been exposed as the obvious playbook from the Chicago and Florida examples of the
Mm-hmm.
plots gone awry,
Yep. Wait,
where they
how
already
pregnant
had a
what
patsy.
how pregnant was she? Do we know?
Oh man, I don't. Honestly, I don't remember, but I do know that this is 100% the story
Are
from
you
Marita Lorenz,
questioning?
which is one of the crazy.
Are you questioning
Yeah, it
like the
is.
timeline of her pregnancy?
I'm just questioning like was it an abortion or was it like they took the kid?
That's I can't get a straight answer, and I don't
Right.
even think she knows because she claims she was drugged,
Mm.
right? And that
So if she was
she
drugged, they
was.
probably didn't care about the kid, I'd assume. And maybe they wanted
I
to get
wouldn't.
rid of the kid or they wanted the kid and now the kid is someone in the world, like
It's probably Trudeau.
ah, that's right.
I'm
That's right.
yeah,
You stole it from.
I'm
That's. I
just
was just gonna say it. You read my mind, Austin. That's hilarious.
it's too funny.
That's insane. So,
It is
okay.
crazy.
So, like, we're talking about all of this. There's. It seems like the government is just creating narratives. I mean, that doesn't seem to us. We know the government's creating all these narratives, right? And using all these different things like these cutouts and different stores, and who knows what cults have been created by the government. Who knows what murderers, what they do. We know what they do with Waco. We know they infiltrate these cults as well. Um, so
Oh
like
man, I
when,
got a different story on Waco, brother. After you sent me
oh
spiraling
really?
due to our last, yeah,
Well,
I
listen.
discovered this 3-page, well, it's like a 100-page report in 3 portions. It's called the Wiltshire Report, and
Mm,
it was sent to Janet Reno, the Attorney General at the time,
yep.
by an individual named Paul Wiltshire, who's an attorney for these CIA operatives, significantly this one individual by the name of Gunther Russbacher. All
Mm,
right, and this guy was apparently a covert CIA operative running black bag operations domestically, and was brought in on first of all, Navy SEALs tipped him off on uh, what truly apparently happened at Waco, transpired at Waco.
mm,
And this is an entirely alternative theory that was presented. And but beyond that, it's interesting because Paul Wiltshire reaches out to this individual operative, Gunther Russbacher, whose life is in danger apparently at this point because one of the members of his covert operational team had essentially began to blow the whistle, and it was against his orders at the beginning of it. I forget the actual excruciating details of it all because I'm new to this thread of
mm,
information, but it's all so fascinating and to me seems very credible. And within also within just sort of the concept of plausible alternative theory, to it does fill in some very significant holes that make more sense to me
mm.
now with this kind of benefit of hindsight, obviously, in this newly found information. But the point being is that this individual, Gunther Russbacher, this covert operative, had apparently Paul Wiltshire, by the way, this who became his attorney, who was apparently a part of the October Surprise Task Force, right, with George Bush Sr. and the hostage crisis,
Yeah.
and so all of this had to do with Iran
Oh.
Contra. That's what this all boils back down to, and I think that once you realize like Iran Contra ties into like the whack and hunt um, um, uh, whack and hunt perm index, right? These private organizations in the private sector that are clear cutouts for the
Can
CIA
you
and
describe what those
intelligence
things are
apparatus.
real quick?
Do what?
Can you describe what those things are that you just referenced?
Yeah, Whack and Hunt is such a crazy organization, honestly, because if I didn't even realize until I started covering Omar Mateen and the Pulse nightclub shooting, and
Yeah.
I also, dude, it's crazy, and I
Yep.
found out that apparently, when it boils down to it, on the Cabazon Indian Reservation, there was this. So keep in mind that you know, Whack and Hunt, right? This private security contractor. It's very interesting because they got this huge contract, right? At the a huge State Department contract, right? And it's very interesting because it was like set records at the time. And by the way, uh, this organization was created by former FBI, former intelligence, right, operative who's running the organization, who had a signed picture of George Bush Sr. in his office, right?
Wonderful.
And I think it was George Wackenhunt was his name.
Hmm.
And yeah, so but it is crazy because I found out about this, and keep in mind, Sherry Seymour is a journalist that many people have fed jacketed recently. I've realized that I didn't understand. I think it was Richard Booth or someone that I very much value their work and a lot of their research. But I believe someone within the context of who has done a lot of wonderful research on the Oklahoma City bombing was basically pointing to the fact that Sherry Seymour seems to have some sort of spook background with ties to intelligence, but she still does provide a very interesting window into the Cabazon Indian Reservation and
Right.
how effectively the intelligence apparatus was utilizing these Indian reservations to run covert basically run covert operations. They were flying in illegal Mexican nationals to produce and cook methamphetamines on the reservation, right?
What?
Yes, and this is in the 90s. And
Hmm.
so after around 10 years of exploiting the Cabazon Indian Reservation, finally a few honest sheriff's deputies and grand jurors came together to form this organization called Decency in Government, and they proceeded to file a lawsuit against the Attorney General of California, the governor, and the director of the FBI for dereliction of duty by knowingly allowing and facilitating drug trafficking and smuggling operations in the area, specifically Central California. So several Indians claimed that they had been forced to participate in some of these criminal actions by local sheriff's deputies, essentially exploiting them as slave labor to produce certain drugs.
Hmm.
Operatives flying small planes in the area using the reservation to smuggle in drugs from Latin America. So that's another aspect of like with Fort Bragg, they were smuggling heroin from Thailand, and they were just it was called the Cadaver Connection, and they
Wow.
were apparently through the coffins of dead MPs, they were actually putting they were it was basically bagged up heroin that they would put into the cavities of the MPs, so it would be in the body themselves,
Hmm.
and they would have a specific tag on those caskets that were actually and they would be met right at with by
For
the
what
covert
purpose? Like,
operatives.
what were they doing with it? Were they infiltrating some other gang or something with this, or just
They were they
unleashing
were
it?
using this heroin to legitimately just smuggle it domestically throughout the US using compromised narcotics investigators from specifically the Fayetteville, North Carolina Police Department. There was a huge section of the narcotics officers who were definitely compromised and working hand in hand with the MPs at the time to effectively run this covert domestic smuggling operation, utilizing again local chapters of cult organizations like the Process Church was actually directly affiliated with this at Fort Bragg. As far as the Helena Stokely was, it's a crazy connection, but
So,
she's a criminal informant. and
Okay.
she exposed a lot of this. And effectively, Prince Beasley was one of the detectives in North Carolina at the time,
Is this a
and he
money making scheme then? Or is it
well,
like
I
a
think not
government
only that,
project?
but I mean, consider what inevitably occurred was they were ratcheting up the private, prison and industrial complex as
Mm-hmm.
well. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really a layered operation where it's kind of like the state just it's another window into what the state does best, right? The self-licking ice cream cone,
Yep.
justifying its own existence.
Right.
And in reality, obviously, they are to blame for the fentanyl crisis as well, right?
Oh,
Look at
100%.
cartel land. I mean,
100%.
they've been working hand in hand with the cartels to manufacture and not only bring in Chinese fentanyl for how long?
Yeah.
I mean, what about Operation Fast and Furious? Like,
Exactly what I was
you
just
know,
thinking. Yep. When you're talking about bringing drugs in, I'm like, oh wow, it's like the way things we do with guns into Mexico. But Obama had no scandals, so I don't know what that is. This is fiction.
man, I'm
um,
telling you, brother,
it's so wild.
it's
So like, okay, so now we can see that's like a window into these operations, and like you just said, it's kind of it's terrifying. The web, because it's not just a money making. It's not just so this guy can make some money. He's getting some cheap heroin in the country. It's then like they throw it into the communities, get people addicted. Then they fill the prisons, make the money off the prisons, and then they got slave labor. And then they're also flying in illegals to make illegal drugs. So it's like
it's
nothing
so
is
crazy.
real, nothing is exists, but it's all happening and it's being pumped out into the country to destroy you and to enrich themselves. So okay,
Right.
when it comes, there's a part of me that's just like I want to avoid the serial killer topic forever. To do this every time you come on, where like we're just going to talk about one thing, but I'm
It's
just.
what I just did to Nephilim Death Squad too, dude. Like, unfortunately I go and then they're like, "Hey, you got to come on and do a part 3 now."
That was
I'm like,
perfect.
"Hell yeah."
Yeah, it's a good scheme, dude. So the serial killer thing is fascinating because when I got into the room, I was a little late. You guys were talking about these horrific crimes that we touched on a bit last time you were on with Jose. Um, this is the whole thing that fascinates me. Is like, okay, we know they do cults, we know they do all this stuff, but let's talk about the serial killer aspect and like, what is your point of view on that? What have you been reading, or why are we looking at it wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that really, again, compare. I sort of mentioned this the last episode, just kind of compare the concept of serial killers to the manufactured misconception that was, in my mind, the conveniently constructed satanic panic,
Mm,
which was an excuse and oversimplification of this mass hysteria that, in my mind, was, it shouldn't be kind of like and also, I was also considering the fact that you kind of like seeing the phenomena as it was constructed in terms of America itself, the U.S. footprint of serial killers. The phenomena began in like the early 70s,
mm,
and then kind of spurred into this wave of the satanic panic, which really was just a reaction to these obvious cult organizations and this very interesting underlying kind of network of occult beliefs that I don't think people were aware of until maybe even the final death nail of the Summer of Love in '69 with
yeah,
Charles Manson.
totally.
Honestly, kind of like shooting that visual onto the world stage in a way that was never kind of witnessed before.
Hmm.
But then, it's like you see what happened with Charles Manson. He was brushing shoulders while living on Cole Street with the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which has direct influence on his path to the OTO Lodge, Pasadena Lodge. The I forget this. What was it? The Devil's Staircase or this? I'm trying to remember now what. But either way, he had been legitimately,
Oh yeah.
obviously not only was he attending the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic while he was on Cole Street, he was
Yep.
also considering this very interesting esoteric occult philosophy that really fundamentally brought in, like, obviously, it was the foundation of the process was um, um, Robert de Grimston, Marianne McLean de Grimston, and they were members who had met. They were members of Scientology who had met while they were. Uh, they apparently knew L. Ron Hubbard personally, were very good friends and close for a time,
Hmm.
which to me, instant red flags because I believe L. Ron Hubbard is an intelligence agent. I
Yeah.
think that. Scientology itself was constructed to be this sort of um, interesting, front within, at least for the intelligence community, within the context of established religious structures of some kind, right?
Why
And I
are all
think
the
that
remote viewers Scientologists?
yeah, exactly. And honestly, it's worse than that when you think of like the psychic warriors or whatever, the men who stare at goats, right? When you
Yeah.
you look
Yeah,
into
yeah,
what
yeah.
they were actually, I mean, all of that played into kind of those psychological warfare techniques that they implemented
Mm.
at Waco, right? That we discussed as well.
So Tom Cruise is a
Which,
Fed.
yeah, yeah, dude, I'm
No.
telling you, man,
He's
it
my
is
favorite
so
actor.
crazy
I'm
though.
sorry. He's my favorite. He's the greatest living actor.
I
Everyone can fight
agree.
me
Tom
on
Cruise.
that. I don't want to derail this, but Tom Cruise, look, he goes to, he falls out of the sky. He loves cinema. um,
I will say that did you ever watch Magnolia, the Paul Thomas
Of
yeah,
Anderson
course.
dude,
film?
of
Oh,
course.
so good, right?
Dude,
That's my favorite Tom Cruise role of all time. He's
I'm
such a piece of
dude,
shit.
yes, dude, I don't care. Like, he can do whatever. He can be a Fed for Scientology, but like Magnolia is amazing. Vanilla Sky is one of my favorite movies.
Cocktail.
Yeah, like he can make weird movies and great
Eyes
movies.
Wide Shut.
Yeah,
I
Eyes
mean,
Wide
Eyes shut.
Shut. Like, come on now. He might have killed Stanley Kubrick. I don't know. As a Fed, getting back for the moon thing. But all right,
right,
back to Manson and the Process Church and all this stuff.
right.
He's brushing shoulders
Yeah,
with all these people. He's being
yeah, and keep
groomed.
in mind, you know, he claimed that it's a crazy story as far as Manson's connections to the process, especially if you consider kind of the process church connections to what played out inevitably 6 months later.
What was
6 months after the Manson murders were the Fort Bragg murders, right? And the murders of Dr. Jeffrey McDonald's family, and
Wow.
and they mimicked it. It could have been a copycat crime if you want to say that, but it straight up mimicked that of the Manson murders. And so, even chanting, acid is groovy, kill the pigs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that was what Helena Stokely was chanting while they were in their official initiatory garb for the local chapter of the process,
Oh wow.
because it was actually a layered operation. They were going after Jeffrey McDonald because he was he was disrupting their heroin trafficking operation, because one of the key operatives was the local chapter's leader and the high priest of this process organization. And he apparently, they called him the Wizard with two Z's, something like that. And yeah,
Sick
and
rap
yeah,
name.
and so he and like three others, including Helena Stokely, went to Dr. Jeffrey McDonald's residence, and you have so many witnesses who saw them in their initiatory robes, carrying candles, neighbors who claimed like, "What the,"
Hmm.
and told the authorities, but they clearly were attempting to cover it up from day one. But they went in, and it was a fertility death ritual as well. So it was not only, because they were practicing black magic, which is, you know, it's malevolent in nature. I mean, that's what it truly is. And the it's that's what I think people are under aware of, is that there are truly, you know, as in terms of what they believe, there are people who legitimately, right,
Hmm.
actually d kind of practice this belief system in a very real way. And I think that that proved out in terms of, right, the Dr. Jeffrey McDonald's murders, because inevitably they go in, they're chanting this, they murder his pregnant wife, they murder his 3-year-old daughter and his 5-year-old daughter,
Jeez.
right? And they beat his ass like to such an extent to where like he had suffered just horrific injuries that it was obvious that he had been stabbed. His lung was entirely
Mm.
punctured, and one of his lungs was like 90% like ineffective, right? Not
Horrible.
functioning. And and yeah, all he could tell them was like at least the first authorities who arrived on the scene was like, just like, fucking don't look at me, man, like take care of my family. Obviously, like, I forget what he said specifically, but that was one of the first things he said, basically. But it's one of the craziest stories ever, and it's very obvious because someone had actually made a call from his residence during the time of the beatings, and there were
Hmm.
multiple, men who were involved who were beating Dr. Jeffrey McDonald at the time, and so again, it kind of led to this very interesting where because the original basically the original litigation was all done within as far as the court hearings were all effectively kind of done within the construct of the military itself, right? They
Mm.
had military hearings, and they ruled in favor of Dr. Jeffrey McDonald. He was entirely innocent. And then it was interesting because one of the prosecutors went private after this and basically made his personal career off of Dr. Jeffrey McDonald and started pursuing litigation against him personally years after the fact.
Mm.
And it very much seems as if he was made the patsy because he was attempting to potentially blow the whistle on the heroin trafficking operation that was being conducted throughout, because
So,
also members of the cult had overdosed on heroin,
mhm.
and he was moonlighting at another hospital not too far from Fort Bragg, and they brought these heroin addicts in, or at least two heroin addicts brought in someone who had overdosed, right? And he saved their life, but he had a policy with the nurses to actually report this at the time, right, to the
Mm.
authorities
Right.
effectively. And so that is what happened. And in essence, he they it resulted in charges and jail time. And so apparently he was viewed, as far as his actual character and reputation at the time, they viewed him as the golden boy, is kind of how he was referenced as well, as far as the military authorities even. They didn't quite appreciate the fact that he wasn't willing to turn a blind eye.
Mm.
And so that was another aspect of it, is that heroin overdoses had skyrocketed within like such a short amount of time, and it was due to this very obvious connection coming through Fort Bragg, and not only Fort Bragg, it was up and down the coast, and from New York to Miami, basically, and so anyway, it's a fascinating thing, but
Wait, let me ask
that
real
I
quick.
could
You're saying his family was like that fertility death ritual, right? And it looked a lot
yeah,
like the Manson Tate LaBianca murders, right? So then,
yep,
is it fair to say that what the news might report on being a copycat murder might is actually the government using that as a veil, as like a a mask to be like, oh,
exactly.
it's not obviously it's not us, it's people doing a copycat, but Manson actually copying Manson would be copying the government,
Right,
uh,
exactly.
because it's MK Ultra
That
system.
I'd like to add
right.
that he was raised on Long Island,
Who was?
Jeffrey McDonald.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
Interesting.
which we always
Interesting.
talk about the serial
A
killers.
hotbed
Hey, by
of
the way,
crazy
that
things.
yeah, that's all connected in with the Son of Sam, and as far as Roy Radin as well, and the Cotton Club killings, and all of these various connections to that's what Doctor or not Doctor, but Detective James Rothstein was referencing as well, is that he was actually talking about how, and again, he's a very interesting resource, honestly. Like, I really admire and respect what he has attempted to expose, because he's a perfect example, right? Ex-head of the department's human trafficking and vice-related crimes division, and he was basically he was tasked with uncovering the CIA's massive trafficking and pedophile networks, which he would report to the New York State Select Committee on Crime,
Mm.
which all came out that there is this perfect um, crossroads intersection where all of this combined, as far as you have this combination of intelligence, these occult cutout organizations, and you have organized crime, obviously syndicates who are directly involved. That's why I think that you have the Chicago mob directly tied in with Dallas so heavily
Mm.
in terms of what was carried out in the JFK assassination. Well, I discovered that John Wayne Gacy is completely affiliated with the Chicago mob.
Wait, tell
Paul
us about that.
Bonacci,
Tell us about that.
who's okay, man, John Wayne Gacy is honestly one of the craziest stories that I've ever been exposed to, and I just recently discovered that apparently he's not only affiliated with um for one, I think that he has very deep political connections. That's kind of where he comes from. He claims to have been trained on this interesting site as well,
Hmm.
which brings in Ed Kemper and brings in like these
Man, yeah.
Philip Paskey was also specifically tied
Kemper
into
Kemper
to
was a
working
genius.
on
Kemper was
do
a
what?
genius. Kemper was a monster, but he was a genius.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's very strange because Kemper himself is tied into to John Wayne Gacy directly because
Can you
there's a
pull up
connection
pictures of John
to
Wayne Gacy?
Kemper.
apparently
John Wayne Gacy.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry, I'm
Ed
just having
Kemper.
Alex pull up pictures of look up the clown pictures that he drew. Right, Gacy was the clown. There, Pogo the clown. Terrible, terrifying. So continue. Sorry.
Oh, you're good, man. No, I just I think that
Mm.
when you look into, the potential connections, it all kind of comes back down to essentially John Norman is really the connecting he's kind of like the individual that brings all of this together because John David Norman ran this really he ran this the pedophile underworld was really like essentially coming from like we have members of the finders who are ordering children from the Odyssey Foundation, which is being propped up by John David Norman.
Mm.
And even after he goes to prison, he changes the name of the operation itself and basically creates the Delta Project, right? And this is such a crazy interesting story there because Delta Project clients apparently there were indications that some of the perpetrators of the Franklin scandal were also clients of the Delta Project. And so
Mm.
you have the Franklin scandal, Finders, the Atlanta child murders with Wayne Williams is also tied into
Yeah.
this as well, because you have the snuff films being orchestrated through the production companies in Atlanta. And and yeah, you have Paul Bonacci, who he overwhelmingly exposed the fact that that there's a potential draw in directly to. And by the way, the Delta Project advertised in an underground child pornography publication called Hermes. All right,
Hmm.
and this all connects into North Fox Island as well, which is Francis Sheldon and his network. And I think people need to realize that that ties in the Oakland County child killers or killings, which is Jacob Wetterling,
Hmm.
which is another one of the paper boys that was abducted around the same time as Johnny Gosh,
Oh yeah,
who
dude, the Gosh story is
yeah,
insane.
right.
Yeah.
So
So where
this
so you're saying these some of these intersect with what Gacy was doing,
absolutely,
and
yeah,
what, so you're s- are, so you're saying like that phrase is like scarred in my brain. He would purchase kids or help because like I forget how he got his victims, but
right, yeah.
what was the
So
connection between him and these places?
well, basically, Phil Paskey was running the Delta Project for John David Norman while he was in prison,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
And Phil Paskey happened to be on John Wayne Gacy's construction crew.
No,
Yes.
shut up, dude.
And by the way, this was all affiliated with Dean Coral out of Houston, who was also procuring and abducting children for John David Norman's Odyssey Foundation
Jeez.
and murdered up to what, 28
Oh
children?
my
And
goodness,
and yeah, so that
dude.
would and he's a serial killer allegedly,
Right.
which I mean, obviously he was definitely involved in killing some of the children,
Right.
but it's, the point being is that these are more now, they're obviously sadistic sociopathic maniacs that
Yeah, of
clearly
course.
have no qualms about committing child murder, but
Right.
at the same time, I think that there's more happening here because John Wayne Gacy as well as Wayne Williams in Atlanta, they both showed signs of multiple personality disorder, right? They had entirely different personalities that they were referring to that the courts just minimized and rejected as being, viable in any sort of way in terms of, assessing the credibility of them acting alone,
Okay.
right? And then,
So the
yeah,
theory then is that some of these people, some of these serial killers might not be what we've been told they are, but in fact, they're like a vessel for people to blame and be held accountable for fake accountability, and then they go into jail. But all these other people who actually used did all these other things, they just throw it on to someone like Gacy, is the
right.
theory, right? And so that reminds
Ex-
me of the Long Island serial killer, something we talk about on this show. A lot of the theories in that case was like it might not be that suspect they have right now in jail. He might be a part of it, but there were so many strange intersections in that story with like super corrupt and violent sheriff, like an insane person, and a lot of high profile people. The suspect in prison right now, who they say is the killer, was a like a high profile architect. Like he had major projects in Manhattan. He does look scary, I'll tell you that. And then another thing, one little thing about Long Island, real quick, is they have a lot of serial killers in that little area. A lot. They also created Lyme's disease out there.
It's a salt water. It's Fire Island.
Yeah, Fire Island. Like the Montauk Project. Weird place. But that is a very interesting thing that we, as in the government, might be using certain people as a shield to cover things.
Absolutely.
Are there? And this is gonna be a tough question that is gonna be almost impossible to ask, but I'm curious what you think about it, or impossible to answer. Are there like serial killers out there that you think are just not connected to this stuff? That you're just like, or is it impossible now to not think that they all might be in some way?
No, I'm discovering that it's no, I'm not ruling out the idea that it's possible. I'm just considering the fact that it makes far more sense how you would imagine them getting away with so many of these alleged, let's say just um how could you accumulate so many victims without actually exposing yourself or overexposing yourself within this frame of time before the authorities connect you to these murders? But it's never actually that they are the sole prime suspect from day one. Effectively, the authorities are always seemingly looking in other directions. Like for the Atlanta child murders, it was all about this list of other potential perpetrators that was then just entirely ignored because
Hmm.
George Bush Sr., he takes a trip and he visits the governor mansion in Atlanta during the course of the trial,
Oh
and
boy.
or I mean during the course of the investigation, and
Right.
he says, if you guys can't wrap this thing up, the feds are coming in, right?
Wow.
So wrap it up. And then the feds come in instantly, and then guess what? Wayne Williams becomes the number one suspect, priority. And all the list of other perpetrators is just hidden out of sight,
Hmm.
and by the way, Edmund Kemper, I had mentioned him earlier. He has direct ties, right, as far as in the army, and
He was
also
friends with the police.
apparently,
He was
dude,
friends with the police.
his yeah, and his father was in the first Special Service Force in World War II, right? In the Devil's Brigade, right? As far as
Eh, Oh wow.
that
Didn't he kill his father? Did Kemper kill his
I
parents? Oh
honestly I
no,
can't remember. I think
maybe
he
he killed
definitely
his.
killed his mother, if I
Well, we
remember
definitely
correctly.
he did more
Yeah,
than that. He definitely killed
right,
her, and then did a lot
yeah,
more. And then when he was done,
right.
according to him, the narrative is like he was healed from the bloodlust after he killed and decapitated and had relations with his mother's severed
He
head.
killed his
Head,
maternal
yeah.
grandparents
He
when he
killed
was
his
15
paternal grandparents. Then
That
he went
was it.
away. Then
and
he
He
came
said,
later
back.
and
killed 8
if
women.
I remember, he had like a statement like he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill his grandma or
Yeah.
something like that.
Ooh.
Like it was really
Yeah,
weird.
dude,
But
he's insane. So like, I just want to say real quick because he's friends with the police, or he was. Um, After he did what he did to his mother, he like went on a little road trip, called the cops that he was friends with, and they all thought he was joking. They were laughing, and he said in the phone call like, "I just did this to my mom. Her head is in the trunk. I think. I think there's even a when he was on probation, his probation officer wrote him like a glowing review while he had another severed head in his trunk. And this is also like a massive man. He is huge. Uh, but he becomes a Fed basically in
wow,
prison because they're using him to profile other killers. And now with this
yeah,
theory threaded through that, are you like, okay, maybe they're not just profiling, maybe they're getting information like the way a large language model scrapes up all the data to become its own thing. Maybe the government, and then Austin, you're making me think about this. Why maybe they astroturfed the idea of true crime into everyone's brains in the past 10
oh my
years
God,
to, to, to
stop
distract
it, bro.
us from the fact that
Right.
the government is actually Ted Bundy. That's terrifying.
Dude, I think you're onto something, brother. And by the way, he claims, that there were reopened secret bases for these guys to be trained at,
Whoa.
as far as out of Fort William Henry Harrison, just outside of town. and he claims that essentially this is very strange that there's a direct connection to John Wayne Gacy through Ed Kemper, and basically it's through the JCs. All
What's
right,
that? Wait,
this
what's
is
that?
a youth organization, United States Junior Chamber,
Hmm.
for future political leaders.
Oh,
That's what it's for,
great.
which is so crazy. But
Great.
it's essentially John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
He joined this group, the U.S. Junior Chamber, also known as JCs, which is a national civic group, which, guess what? Odd coincidence. So did fellow serial killer Ed Kemper, who belonged to that group as well at the
No
time, and
way.
other very well known. And by the way, Gacy was named Outstanding Vice President of the Waterloo JCs in 1967. And other JCs include President Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford, Richard Nixon, Al Gore, Walter Mondale, Hubert Humphreys, Bill Gates, and Howard Hughes, Charles Lindbergh. I mean, like,
Okay. So
how many?
you
And then he
all
claims that
serial killers.
he joined the JCs while he was at the Atascadero State Hospital,
What?
which in my mind is like, okay,
Mm.
this is after he killed his grandparents.
Right. Oh yeah. Okay. So because he was really young. He was a 15, right? You said 15 when he killed his grandparents
Yeah.
with a rifle, I think, right?
I didn't see that part, but probably.
Man. Yeah, Bundy, people forget, politician. Like he was in politics. I don't know if he was actually voted in politics, but he was in the political world, and then just spent his days driving around in a VW Bug, pretending to have a limp. I spoke to someone who claims to have run away from him out of his car.
Oh my
And her
God.
story,
But
it's hard to verify this stuff, but her story is insane.
right, that is insane. But you know what really kind of stuck out to me in regard to John Wayne Gacy was also the fact that it was basically discovered when he was apprehended and the authorities raided his property, that he was directly connected into John David Norman's pedophile ring and was helping abduct children for this very reason with Phil Paskey, who was running the Delta Project on his behalf. And there were blackmail files on local individuals held by John Wayne Gacy at his property,
Mm.
whenever they effectively raided it. And so that I think is very important because again, it draws perfectly into the human compromise aspect of all of this. And I think when it comes down to the fact that even David Berkowitz, man, like
Yeah.
that was something that blew me away because I knew that Roy Cohn had these terrible. I knew he was a pedophile who abused and raped Richard Kerr from the Kinkora Boys Home.
Mm.
I know that. Roy Cohn, where's my Roy Cohn? It's just like one of the most disgusting things you could ever imagine. And by the way, he's hosting parties for human compromise in Massachusetts whenever the Son of Sam murders are being conducted, basically. And essentially, what is connected there is basically you have Roy Cohn apparently, according to David Berkowitz, the Process Church was providing children for sex at parties held by wealthy people in Westchester, Manhattan, Connecticut, and Long Island. And David Berkowitz informed Maury Terry, who wrote The Ultimate Evil,
Yeah.
that one of these parties were held at Roy Cohn's house in Connecticut.
Dude.
Two further witnesses maintained that occasionally present at these parties were a Yonkers judge, at least two Westchester County politicians, a high-ranking New York State politician, a celebrated but later murdered physician, a Nobel Prize-winning doctor, and two aides to then Mayor of New York City, Abraham Beame.
I mean, I know the government is doing some of the most nefarious things. Like they are legitimately a serial killer and a mass murderer. And it becomes easier for the American people, and they know this, to digest that there's just one evil man lurking in the community. Whereas this is like an existential crisis for the world to fully understand.
Right.
And a lot of us do understand this. Like we know about Epstein. We read something like Chaos. We know there's a deep, dark web that's permeated this entire country and world. So like the Berkowitz thing is like, yeah, satanic panic, give them a face, give them their boogeyman, then it deflates when there's something much larger out there. Like, it reminds me of True Detective. The first season of True Detective, there's a boogeyman, but you come in contact with like a much larger web of evil. I love True Detective. That first
That
season
first
is,
season,
oh man,
extraordinary, brother. Yeah,
it's
and
so good.
honestly, it set me on a path because man, I did an episode um called The Real True Detective,
Mm,
and it was about um man, it was about the Hosanna Church scandal
hmm,
was the first portion, and then I directly tied in the Delphi murders from
mm.
Indiana that
Oh
occurred
wow,
in
of course,
2017.
Koberger, right? Oh no, no, that's different. That's different.
Now this one was the so there were two girls who were essentially went missing and their bodies were found and they were effectively arranged. You know,
Yeah,
their bodies had been arranged in
right.
this very specific, what looked as if it was a neo-pagan death ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it actually was, because I inevitably discovered that there's a group and organization that are directly behind it, and I know the names of the perpetrators, and I know the witnesses who have named them as being there in that moment, what they did to those two girls.
Wow.
And yeah, they were a part of a neo-pagan organization called the Vinlander Group. And this neo-pagan organization was entirely infiltrated into the prison system of Indiana at the time, and I think still to this day, because the actual patsy that they are now refusing to let, provide a real defense for himself, he was entirely brought up on charges years after the fact because they needed a patsy, and some ridiculous story about a clerk finding a note about him coming in. He volunteered to come in because he had been at the Delphi Trail and just so happened to tell his wife, who said, "Hey, you told me you were at the trail. The authorities are asking anybody who might have seen something,
Whoa.
come in and say." And he's like, "Oh shit, okay." He goes in to volunteer this all on, out of ethical
Mm-mm-mm.
standards
Mm-hmm.
and being a moral person, and is essentially years after his statement, they bring him in because they need a patsy, and so
Of course.
it's really strange because what occurred there is so very obvious. They were using these ancient runes, as far as the Ansuts was the key ancient rune that they had carved into
Right.
the tree, which directly, if you remember, the way the bodies were staged, exactly like that first crime scene in True Detective season 1, where the girl has the
The
antlers on her
antlers.
head.
Yep.
Same
Tied up.
thing
Yep.
happened to this girl, man, Abby, and yeah,
Interesting.
and so antlers on the head, positioned naked.
Mm.
The other girl had her clothes removed, and then yeah, one of them was naked. The other one had the other one's clothes on. It was so strange,
Hmm.
and but again, they're positioned as the painting Odin hanging from World Tree.
Oh wow.
It's yeah, dude, it's so crazy, and all the members of the Vinlander group who were entirely infiltrated into the prison system, all the prison guards were affiliated with this Odinite neo-pagan Vinlander organization and were even wearing the patches on their prison uniforms
What?
until the attorneys for the alleged patsy, which is his name's escaping me right now. Not it's driving me crazy. But either way, he was just convicted and given a ridiculous sentence.
Wow.
And yeah, and it turns out that his attorneys recognized the patch, and as soon as they recognized the patch, the prison guards removed it from their uniforms and they no longer had the pet. But they were saying that every single conversation they had with their client while he was in prison was entirely being influenced and recorded by the prison guards. Yes, so it's
Wow.
like, and by the way, there was a federal task force who was who was directly created to investigate the Odinist ties to the crime scene,
Wow.
the Odinite times ties to the crime scene. And so I forget the name of the federal agent as well, but there were three of them specifically who were really a part of this task force, seemingly pursuing this investigation in an ethical way with real integrity. And what effectively happens
That's
is this
crazy.
this individual who happened to be a longtime prison guard had political ambitions. He had ran on some ridiculous anti-gun platform in Indiana and entirely lost. Well, this guy who's affiliated with the prison guards and the maximum facility prison there in Indiana, he just so happens to drive up to the federal building in Indiana, lob Molotov cocktails at the federal building to provoke and entice out the only good faith actor in the task force investigating the Odinite signatures of the crime scene, and then shoots him in cold blood
What?
on this outside the steps of the federal building. And then all of a sudden, directly afterward, and by the way, what happens to the shooter? He somehow, eh, in throughout this firefight, gets back into his truck, goes to the nearby hospital, and gets treated for his wounds. And and by the way, just after this occurs, the task force and the FBI is removed from the case. No more investigating the Delphi murders.
Is there no answer to that? Like, was there no official
I, they,
answer? Official answer to what happened with the murders?
No, they just say that
Whoa.
this guy acted alone. He was a sick freak who just wanted to sexually abuse the girls, although he didn't sexually
Whoa.
abuse the girls. It None of it makes sense,
Yeah.
and they're clearly utilizing a patsy because, in my mind, this organization is running. It's far more deeply connected to the local political system than people are aware of, and you can't expose the fact that you have. Loyalties of all the prison guards in the system, and
Right.
that are running the maximum facility in Indiana are all affiliated with a Vinland or Odinite group, which are clearly practicing blood rituals,
Yeah. Right.
which is, and by the way, there's this interesting connection there. This guy who, I'm trying to remember his name too, Anthony, uh, oh shit. Um, Anthony Shots. Yeah, that was the name of his
Mm.
profile. It was a Snapchat profile. And basically, you look up a picture of this dude, all right, and talk about the Jimmy Savile effect, right? Where you're like, this fucking guy did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he's not guilty. And Anthony Shots seemingly was procuring children through Snapchat. Basically, this is the
Sheesh.
modern day version of how you abduct children and get
Yeah.
them into physical positions where you can then procure them. So, by the way, one of the accounts that he was interacting with on his Anthony Shots profile, where he's using this fake picture of a male model. He's acting as if he's living this life of luxury and has all these nice cars and he's just enticing these young girls to respond and engage with his profile. And then he gets he this profile had directly engaged with those two girls just before their abduction and deaths
Oh my
occurred.
goodness.
And it turns out that he's tied into a network where he seemingly was helping facilitate the abduction of these children by putting them into these physical positions, like meet me at this place, and um, and
Mm.
so basically what had happened is one other account that he had engaged with had reported that just after, within 48 hours or 24 hours of responding and interacting with this profile, a fucking masked man showed up outside their window of their personal bedroom, right? Of
Mm.
just this young girl. And so again, this is
Mm.
just like, talk about a window into modern day systematic abuse and abductions as far as this is concerning
Right.
human compromise
This is
and
the fake
human
photo,
trafficking.
the
I
one he
know
used.
Crazy, right?
we're running out of time, but if you have time to answer this, like, so we know that there's these deep dark webs happening in the country. Why do you think? Is it purely because the people in charge are just this bloodthirsty? Is it blackmail? Like, where do you think? What do you think is going on? Like, why?
Man, it's I think long standing the top currency in BC has been sexual blackmail and human compromise. I
Right.
do believe that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's been really entrenched systematically at this point. And I also think that when I covered the Psychopath Machine, that book by the victim from Oak Ridge, um, I just said our current reality is far stranger than fiction,
Yeah.
and we're talking Manchurian candidates, programmed assassins, manufactured mercenaries, secret government programs, and a careful, systematic assault being waged on the human psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And then I quoted John Ronson, and I said, the psychopath test, right?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, madness was everywhere.
Mm.
And I was determined to learn about the impact it had on the way society evolves. Psychopaths make the world go round. Society is an expression of that particular sort of madness. I've always believed society to be a fundamentally rational thing, but what if it isn't? What if it is built on insanity? And it's just,
I think it's
I,
true.
I,
I mean,
I think,
I believe in the
yeah,
fall of man, so it actually has been insanity ever since. And the story right after Adam and Eve leave the garden is the brother killing their brother, right? Like it's Cain and Abel. It's just a foundation of corruption and violence. And yeah, it's alarming. And while you were talking about the Patsy stuff and like we were talking about the boogeyman idea, made me think about just everything. We mentioned Epstein briefly, but also like the Diddy stuff. Like Diddy might just be a face for one. He's one small piece of a much larger puzzle, and I'm curious if that trial is going to give us any hints as to anything else. It's like not like once Epstein went away, we didn't really learn much about. We know maybe like Prince Andrew and like there's obviously a lot of people who are involved, but we don't really know clients.
right.
At least they haven't given us an official list. I don't believe one exists
I haven't
anymore.
looked into it, but I saw a report that just came. I just saw a report yesterday that said a key priority witness in the Diddy trial found dead.
Oh, I didn't see that part. I saw she was missing.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw
And I
she
was
was
like,
missing.
uh-oh.
Oh, jeez.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
And
there,
so it
dude.
begins.
There was a judge looking into one of the bank issues with Epstein. I don't know if it was an offshore account or something. Maybe it was a Chase Bank thing. I forget what it was. But one of the judges involved with the Epstein case, some guy dressed up as a FedEx worker showed up. This is like a few years ago to her house and shot her son dead.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
while she was in the middle of it.
I
Um,
remember that. Yeah, dude.
dude, that's a crazy story too. So it's like I
You don't
know
think an intelligence asset could pose as a FedEx driver?
exactly. Well, they found that guy.
Yeah.
They found that guy dead. So it might have been a patsy, right?
Ah, there you go.
It might have been like the whole
That
thing
is
we're talking
fascinating.
about. There's so many stories like this where you see horrible things happen, or as horrible things happening, you're like, wait, I thought there were two people involved, and all of a sudden now it's one person. Like Oklahoma City bombings got that scenario, right? There's
Right.
one John Doe number two, I think, and it didn't
Hmm.
exist, I believe. And there was a mass shooting in Maine a few years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And there were a lot of conflicting stories about that. The reports were like, we saw two people, we saw one person. That guy was eventually found dead. Then it sounds like that guy was in a mental institution for a while, or some kind of psychotherapy
Of
situation,
course.
right? And
Hmm.
he had heard voices and da 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 da. I'm like, oh, jeez, it's always
All the hallmarks, my brother.
it's always so close. It's like just one away from an
Yeah.
MK Ultra facility, which is why I asked you guys last time we talked about it just a bit, like, how do you even look at the news anymore and not see this pattern? Because it makes us sound crazy to people who don't listen or read to this stuff at all. But you can lay it out and be like, look, I don't know definitively. I don't know anything definitively. But
Yeah,
these connections are very bizarre and very
exactly.
frequent, and something's going on that
Yeah.
I can explain till I'm blue in the face, but we're
I
just
will
small
say,
small humans.
I will say, never in my life did I expect to find myself in this position. Um, in any like, if my very first episode ever was MK Ultra. It
Hmm.
was about MK Ultra, and I would have done it much differently now. But at the same time, it's like to see, I was I was forced into this line of investigation, dragged, kicking and screaming the entire way, not wanting to admit this as our current realistic power paradigm, but it's undeniable. Like that is how I truly feel at this moment. And it's like, yeah, we can remain skeptical and always attempt to be as objective as possible and
Hmm.
not fall into confirmation bias. But when the evidence becomes so clear and the patterns are so evident and just consistently resurface so very often, um yeah, I'm terrified. I'm extraordinarily terrified by what the potential reality we truly face, and the threats that, you know, the real threat that is being posed. Honestly, it's that my intention here is just to figure this out conceptually for myself in some sort of way,
Hmm.
right? Because it's like, at the end of the day, I feel ultimately grateful and blessed that I'm surrounded by good people that are honestly and objectively pursuing the truth in a beautiful way
Mm.
and practice the law of abundance, live by ethical principles, like that's heaven to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, and so despite all this darkness, right? Um, we can at an individual level, you know, like we can pursue something worthwhile that will provide us with, I think, again, just a life worth living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Oh
we can
yeah.
look at this and it doesn't have to entirely disrupt our ability to be happy. You know, it's
Of
like,
course.
so be it. I know it's a terrifying prospect,
Ignorance,
but all we can
ignorance,
do is shine a light on it,
ignorance
you
is
know?
bliss is a psyop.
Mhm.
It's
Absolutely,
it
brother.
like I'd rather know as much as I can about the world around me so I can then give my kids a family. Not that I'm telling my kids about this stuff right now, but like I
Right.
want them to be able to be like, I'm inheriting a dark and sinister world, but there's also beauty everywhere. And I need to know, they need to know how to navigate it as best they can. And the more they know, the better. It's like our time here is fleeting. We won't be here very long. It's like that. But the ideas and the stories we get to share, those can be immortal, right? Like these ideas can spread, and the ideas will help, temper all the darkness that we talk about. The more people that know about this stuff, the less it's going to work. Like the spell is going to eventually start to, I think it's already begun. I think the spell is beginning to fade. But this is a huge network, an evil apparatus that extends across the entire earth. So, it's going to take a
That's why
while.
I am I'm just so like the entire goal is to know and be at least somewhat prepared as far as knowing what I should protect my children from, you know?
Yep.
And like that, man, all of this information has like I want to be a father.
Hmm.
I want to have children and have that experience just as I mean desperately. But I've never been more just a little it's a scary prospect, man, to just but although I know that it's worthwhile, it's just like that was kind of where I ultimately found myself is trying to figure out what I should understand before I kind of bring them into this world,
Hmm.
in the first place. And also, it's led me down this path where I overwhelmingly want to find a way to keep them out of public school.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
honestly, like,
I'm
you know
doing
what I
that.
mean?
That's what we do. I
Yeah.
think having a family is the greatest
Right.
rebellion against all the darkness of modernity. And it's
You're
always
totally right,
it's
man.
always been bad. I mean, you can go throughout history and be like, anyone could always ask like, why are we bringing kids in this? You think about the '60s, just in America alone. What an insane time! All the assassinations, all this stuff, and people are looking around like, we're still gonna have kids. We're gonna, you got to. That's the only like real beacon of hope to help make the future better is to raise better kids. And
You're
we've
absolutely
been
right,
failing
man.
at it, the collective we, because of how bad public schools are, and people outsource their parenting to other people, either tablets
Mm,
or public schools, and those are cult indoctrination, institutions themselves. But I think it's always the best time to have a kid. Always best time to start
yeah.
a family, and that is your best way. I think you become a better person as
Thank you,
a
right, man.
father, like 100%. But it's still a struggle, and you're still gonna figure out, learn new ways to deal with all these problems, and also be like, I fall short, in this crazy world. But yo, that's a good way to end this on a. This is gonna be our Mother's Day episode. So
Oh,
Go
hell
make
yeah.
the
I like
babies.
that. I like, yeah. So I like that we ended up with the family thing. 'Cause that's honestly ultimately it's the most important thing. Is how you share these stories with the next generations, and how they're gonna run with it. That's it. Because what we're doing, we're just talking about stuff we learned from other people who wrote about it, and then we're interpreting it and then applying it to the way we see the world now and everything around us. And now we're gonna pass it off to the next generation and be like, now you run with it, and just hopefully they get the ball a little further down the line.
Right.
Well, my man,
Agreed.
let everyone know where they can find you.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys. Obviously, I hope you know how much I appreciate the opportunity and then
Mm,
just the good conversation, man. Like,
of course.
uh, it's a beautiful thing, as I said, to find myself in a position where I feel like I'm surrounded by so many good people, like-minded individuals who have true, principles. And so anytime I get the opportunity, I will say yes. And I love the idea of having a conversation with you guys. And
Thank you.
and again, objectively pursuing the truth is a beautiful thing. So I appreciate you. And all of you guys can find me at the Underclass Podcast. Definitely the best place to support me. If anything I've ever done resonated with you is my Patreon, patreon.com/the Underclass Podcast. And I do have some sort of incentive. At the very least, I have a paywalled show with Brad Bankley and Sam Tripoli called Whatever This Is. It's been a lot of fun. And then Already Dead, every Tuesday night, 9:30 Eastern time with Jose, which is always a good time. So but beyond that, yeah, thank you again, brother.
Awesome.
For
Dude,
sure.
it's always a pleasure to talk. And I guess maybe the next time I'll see you, are you going to be at Bohemian Grove? I forget.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All
I'll
right.
be there.
Great. Awesome. I'll see you there.
Bye.
See you, dude.
Brother.
He's
Bye.
amazing. You know what I want to invent?
What's
I don't,
that?
It's probably already exists, but since I'm like a caveman, I have no idea how these things work. He's like the perfect kind of guest that would be fun for the audience to be able to hold like the phone or the tablet, and everything he talks about, a hyperlink shows up on the screen
Yes.
to take you to the thing he just referenced.
Yes.
Because like one of the things I noticed about I watch Rogan every now and then, but there was one thing with the Alex Jones episode, maybe it was the last one, where they kept like stopping the Google, and I just and like sometimes it's worth it, right? Like we do it, but it just like he's got so much information to get out.
Right.
I'd rather it get out and we'll double back to it, or the audience will just, because like you just trust the audience, they'll be like, that was interesting or weird, like let's look it up. But imagine if you could do that. It might already exist, but
We
like
might need to bring in AI to have like a chalkboard in the background
I
and
mean,
connect
honestly,
all the dots for us.
it's possible. Yeah, right. Could you imagine? But it would be cool if that could happen. Where like one little thing, a passing comment, and link it immediately.
Yeah, because I mean,
to-
you asked about the John Wayne Gacy clown, and I'm like, try to get it up, and
Oh yeah,
there's
can you
nowhere to
bring
put
up?
it
Can you
in.
bring that up?
Oh yeah, sure.
This is what he painted, right? Like, did he paint these? And oh, that's
You know,
actually
it's
him,
really hard-
right?
Yeah, this is him.
Yeah,
Look at this.
guys, if you're not watching
like,
this
not really.
right now, you're missing out on the creepiest clown art.
I mean, you can see why people have a fear of clowns.
And the amazing metal band, I believe from Florida, known as Acid Bath. If you can look that up really quick.
Wait, what?
Acid Bath used John Wayne Gacy art for their cover, which is how I encountered this in the 8th grade. Yeah, look at that.
Oh, God.
This album is amazing. I had this cassette.
Is this it
Acid
right
Bath is sick. I think they're actually playing shows again. Yeah, look at that. Oh man, classic. But this is depraved. Totally depraved. I didn't realize when I was in 8th grade what that was from. I was like, oh, okay, creepy clown. It was way worse. It's way worse.
Yeah.
Happy Mother's Day. So for those, I didn't say this. I meant to say this in the beginning. This is a pre-record. You probably already knew that. But I would have said Happy Mother's Day in the beginning. I forgot. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Happy Mother's Day to you.
Thanks.
And to you.
So we wanted to spend our day with the families, and we came in to pre-record.
Yeah.
What day is it? Saturday?
I know. Yeah, Saturday.
In the year 2000.
If you're looking for some Mother's Day movies, you can watch the Dark Web movie that Chris and I just watched called Unfriended Dark Web.
The heck is that?
It's a movie from 2018, and it basically takes place on a laptop, and it's about this teenage boy who steals a laptop, and so he starts going in it and like replacing everything like with his like sign and stuff, and he's Skyping with his friends, and they're having like this game night thing. Well, the dark web is involved. It's really more of like a game, and these people are being set out to be murdered, and what for? You know, for money, essentially. You know, and then it also reminds me of another movie called Red Rooms. Also about the dark web, but that's more about a serial killer guy who kidnaps women, and he video records it, and then there's videotape out there, and the dark web is bidding on purchasing.
Right. So this is how you guys spend your nights?
Yeah.
No,
but I blame Chris. No, I was joking about that, but I was just trying to tie it into our theme today, or whatever day it is.
Yeah, I watched Terminator last night. That movie's amazing.
Wow.
The first one is so good.
Wow.
There's some really bad graphics, and the scenes from the future are horrible in terms of graphics wise. But
What made you go down that road?
Well, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that in another episode because that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Okay.
But what sparked it was listening to the AI Senate hearing that just happened like a day or two ago, and the first senator to ask questions brought up Skynet, but like he had like a silly positive spin on all of it, and I was just like, oh yeah, Skynet. I've been meaning to watch Terminator again, and as a kid, like I think I watched it here and there, but never watched it in full. And then it just kind of like my memory absorbed Terminator as if I watched it in my young years. But I played the Game Boy video game a lot. But that movie, it was incredible.
Oh yeah, 1984.
1984.
Yeah, that's my year.
That's your year? I'm the year after. Yep. It's great. It's such a good movie. Highly recommend it. My favorite war movie.
Well, we gave you plenty of stuff to watch on Mother's Day.
Yeah. Also the movie Mother. Which is
that's the best comedy of all time. Were you talking about the comedy or are you talking about the horror movie?
Not at all. Not at all. Would you call it a horror movie? Is it the one with Jennifer Lawrence?
I would call it a horror.
It is horror. It's horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah. Or you can watch The Other Mother, which is a comedy.
I don't know that
Brooks. Come on.
With Mel Brooks?
Albert Brooks.
Oh, Albert Brooks? Okay, I don't know that one.
Oh my God, it's one of the best.
Okay. All right. All right, sweet. Well, you guys have your marching orders. You heard the movies you got to watch now.
Another question I was going to ask while you guys were talking is, do we need a portrait of George Bush Sr. somewhere in the studio?
Hell no.
I'm just saying we could be protected. It's like sage
protected?
at this point.
Protected?
The government.
We
won't
have
attack
enough
us.
ghouls in this room. Last thing I need is a George Bush Sr. HW.
He seems to be popping up in everything we talk about.
He's evil. He is the CIA.
Exactly. The CIA won't bother us if they just see a portrait of
the CIA
George.
already bothers us. They're outside this window right now, hovering. Like I said, the helicopter. They're descending from the tree line as we speak. No, there's any picture of HW gets thrown right down the hole that's in the basement into Hades, where he belongs. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in. You can find me online at Shane Cashman. The show is Inverted World Live. You know that. You've been tuning in. Have a happy Mother's Day. Alex, what about you?
I am Alex Ayala on X. Have a happy Mother's Day.
See you all next time.